Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to your lunchtime, our lunch and learn. And today we're going to be giving an introduction to better business cases. Now, before we start, just a kind of a quick check on how we run these sessions. We're very happy that people get live and interact with us. So as a minimum, it's worth opening your chat in Zoom. So there's any questions that we want to kind of play with, just stick them in there and we can kind of answer them as required. Otherwise, we're happy that you unmute yourself and kind of just make yourself known and ask questions live. I'm happy to take those questions as we go through the session. So very happy to have you with us. So my name is Eileen Roden. I'm one of the founders and directors of PMO Learning as well as House of PMO. As my kind of bio says there, I have been in and around PMOs for all of my working life, though I haven't always worked in a PMO. Certainly the last few years I've been in the other side of the fence, helping people to set up their PMOs and deliver projects and programs more effectively in their organization. So I have to say this is a subject very dear to my heart. It's one of the kind of the theories and frameworks that I'm very confident about, know that it works, and I'm really happy to kind that we've got it now in our portfolio and can share with all of you lovely people who want to attend our courses. So just a quick bit about PMO Learning if you've not been with us before, this is your first time of coming across us. We are a specialist provider of PMO education. We do what we say on the tin. We're really focused about upskilling and educating people who work in a PMO context. So whether that's close to a PMO or actually in a PMO. I think one of the real differentiators about coming to have some training with PMO Learning is that all of our trainers have all got PMO experience, and a number of our trainers are actually still working in a PMO. So they've got some kind of real life experience that they can share as we go through the course. And I think, you know, one of the other things that we're very kind of keen to do in our courses is we recognize that for a number of the courses, they're very much kind of certification based, but at the same time, you want to make sure that when you leave the course, that you've actually got something practical that you can use at your office. So that's where we are and who we are. So, as I said, the purpose of today's session, and we'll finish one or before, is to introduce the Better Business Cases framework. So this is sometimes called the 5-case model. And as you may or may not be aware, it's been mandated. The training and the framework is actually mandated for anybody who works in the UK public sector, which means that, you know, well, you could be saying, well, actually, I don't work in the public sector, therefore I don't need to do it. What is really interesting, though, and what I really love about this is that actually I think what it contains is actually useful to anybody who works in a PMO, who works in any sector, whether it be or public and the private sector. So hopefully I'm kind of going to cover through some of that today. I think the other thing that people think about, well, surely it's the project manager or the project sponsor who own and write the business cases. But actually, if you work in a PMO, your role is essential to make sure that the kind of what we set up in terms of how business cases are produced, how they're reviewed and approved, also kind of sits within the role of the PMO. So actually understanding the framework will hopefully allow you to set something up more effectively within your organization. And as with any other framework, so whether it be a project delivery framework, a risk management framework, the idea is we get to understand what all of the theory is, and then we can have the conversations about, well, actually, how do we take some of those best bits and how do we take those kind of key things and apply them in our organization? So we don't ever advocate anybody taking the whole textbook and doing it kind of a little bit at a time and kind of make sure we've got it all in place. It's actually doing the things that make a difference to the problems that we have in our organization. So during today's session, I'm going to talk a little bit about the framework itself. I'm going to talk about the relevance, and I'm also going to talk a little bit about the certification that has been set up around better business cases. And as I said, we've had a couple of questions prior to the session, which hopefully you'll see that they've been addressed as we go through the deck. But if there's anything else that kind of comes up, feel free to stick that in chat and we can have a conversation. So let's have a look at the kind of the fundamental kind of premise on which this whole kind of theory was developed by central government, and the Welsh government collaborated in that. And the premise is that the business case is actually at the root cause of project failure. We don't do sufficient thinking up front about understanding what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're going to do it, when we're going to do it. And so some of the analysis work that has been undertaken actually highlights, like, if we did a good business case that actually looked at exactly what we were going to deliver and how we're going to deliver it. So whether that be waterfall or agile, yes, both things have to have a fundamental business case that we're working to. And interestingly, from an agile perspective, having a fixed budget is one of the essentials of having an agile project. So, you still need to have your business case in there, though you may not necessarily have the detailed plan. The business case is still a fundamental part of any project delivery. So you can see some of the common causes there of project failure. So it's about, perhaps we haven't got the right stakeholders involved. We haven't necessarily have thought through how we're going to deliver it. So we don't have skills and the proven approach. I'm interested if anybody has recognizes any of those common causes of project failure in their organization. If you can recognize any of those, then potentially the Better Business Cases framework has something in there that you can use to improve business case development in your organization. If we're not in the public sector, then ministerial ownership might not necessarily be something that we have to deal with, but certainly senior management and leadership ownership is definitely something that potentially is in there. Some other statistics around business cases. When Gartner did a study of projects, they identified 75% of projects that were considered failures had solutions that did not do what was agreed, didn't deliver the problems that were addressed in the business case, that they missed their deadlines, and over half of them came in 200% over budget. So that, kind of pretty much of an indictment of kind of poor business case rating. And then the Standish Group, when they did their report, they suggested that the business cases that they looked at, if they were kind of done correctly, 30% of the projects that had been signed off because of those business cases should be cancelled overnight because there wasn't sufficient information in to really justify project being signed off. And out of the remaining ones, 53% of them were so worrying that they should actually be challenged. So interestingly, this guidance is not just looking at the building of the business case, but also provides some quality assurance checks of that business case. So it's relevant for people, as I said, not just people in the PMO, but people who are making decisions on business cases, to be clear about what they should be looking at, questions that they should be asking, and some challenges about the information that they are provided. So this is where we are. And as the government identified, they were having problems in public sector projects. They've actually kind of got and published something called the Green Book. So this is central government guidance on how to appraise those business cases and do the detailed evaluation. Obviously, that was very kind of centric to public sector projects. And so what they did from that, they extracted some guidance on actually kind of building a business case to allow the evaluation to happen in a sensible and structured way. And they've actually kind of produced two documents. Both of them are covered in the case study, but predominantly it's on the project business case within the context of programs. They've produced this guide to developing the project business case. Now, it is available for download from the gov.uk. And it is the two blue books that are used from the certifications. So that's where it came from. That's the problems that it's trying to address. But I really wanted to give some of my personal observations. So as I said, I've worked in PMOs all of my work and life, certainly working with them. And over the last 20 years, when I've been working with clients and developing some of their project management processes, putting in place some governance structures, looking at how we do risk management in their organizations, there's a number of things that I've identified. And again, even if you didn't recognize some of those OGC problems with projects, you may or might recognize some of the things that I observed. So the first thing is that organizations seem to have this mentality is that we want to get all business cases approved. That's where we are with the mentality. Secondly, is that a lot of PMOs provide guidance on business cases, but typically it is a template with kind of some words in each box in terms of what information that needs to be put in each of those boxes, but it doesn't really give any indication in terms of what processes and actually how to get that information, who to involve to get that information. The third thing that I've noticed is that a lot of the business case is actually focused on what we're doing. So the project manager and the project team know what has to be delivered, but there's not enough not enough exploration in terms of why things are being done in the first place, and actually looking at kind of the variety of things that need doing, which kind of leads me on to my fourth observation, is that business cases typically have a single option. And I can hear you all saying, no, Eileen, we always put three options in our business case. But I would suggest that very often those three, even in those three, there's only one true option, and we will kind of come and have a look at that in a moment. And then the final one, observation that I've found is people tend to view that money or capital is the biggest constraint. Oh, if we had more money, we'd be able to do kind of lots more projects. And actually, in reality, there's an awful lot of organizations get to the end of the year and they've still got capital to spend. There's been other things that have stopped them actually delivering the projects that they had in their portfolio. So I just want to spend a few minutes looking at these five different observations that I've made on projects, and look at kind of how the Better Business Cases framework helps us to address some of these challenges. So let's have a look at the first one, where organizations aim to get all business cases approved. So having delivered this course in a number of organizations, what we get is, oh, I've had my business case, it wasn't signed off, so I'll be going again to the next meeting to get it signed off. And there's this constant drive to kind of say, well, actually, we're putting a business case together. The obvious answer is because somebody wants us to do something, and therefore we need to kind of get the cost justification for the project. So a lot of the time that we spend is actually doing, finding kind of how much the project's going to cost, and then through various forms, look up the benefits to justify what we want to do and get that signed off. Whereas actually what we should be taking a step back and thinking about why we do business cases in the first place. What we're trying to do, it's essentially an investigation. What we're trying to do is say, we need to go and have a look for some evidence to see whether we need to make a change at all. If we do need to make a change, what are the options? And out of those options, which one do we think is the best solution? And we'll talk about kind of what makes the best solution in a while for this part of the organization. So actually what we need to get to is to a position where somebody comes back, so whether that be the sponsor with the support of a project manager, often we have kind of business case managers, they'll come with a business case and we say, we've done the investigation, and actually we don't believe that there's good enough reason to actually do anything at all, because all of the changes that we'd identified we could do actually don't give us enough benefit, or actually we've identified that there is something that we proceed. And so we need to start changing the mindset of our organizations to say, developing a business case is an exploration. It's an investigation to look out evidence to justify change, not just looking for some cost justification. And again, we'll come back in terms of kind of how that evidence is presented, so we can make a justified decision on that each and every business case. So that's my first one. As I said, if there's anything you agree or disagree with, it's kind of do stick that in the chat. So my second observation is that many PMOs provide guidance and provide a template for people to complete in order to be submitted to the investment committee for approval or authorization. So one of the actual kind of great things about the best practice is that actually it takes you through that process. It actually says there are 10 steps that you need to follow to get to a well-written business case. And within those 10 steps, there are 35 actions. Now, and I challenge this, and we do it on every course. We say, I'm happy for anybody to look at those 35 actions and say, I don't believe that one's needed. Because everyone just makes good sense to do. And if we were investing our own money and investing our company's money, they are the right questions and activities to go through in order to get to the right decision on that business case. So I've just kind of put those kind of 10 steps up there. And again, it's too small to go through all of the 35 actions, but you can kind of get the idea. Now, the other thing to recognise is we've already talked about the level of tailorability. Now, this Better Business Cases process is for justifying spend on larger projects. We wouldn't expect you to go through this process for just a re-procurement or a kind of a very small kind of what we would need a kind of a cost justification for. So these are about the kind of the big solid projects in your organization, and those are the 10 steps we'd go through. Within that, we'd also have a range of tools and techniques to help you, as I said, not just kind of look at what needs to be done, but gives us an indication of how things need to be done. But it also has embedded within it assurance and quality criteria for the business case as we produce it. And as I said, you know, even if you're not public sector, looking at some of those assurance and quality criteria are still very applicable for whether you're working in kind of the private sector or even kind of the third sector. So going through this process actually provides us with a whole raft of evidence. And I think this again is just a viewing how we're pulling our business case together a bit differently. So what we're not doing is kind of doing one section, then doing the second section, doing the third section. What we're doing is we're creating this body of evidence. And then what the 5-case model or the Better Business Cases model takes us through, it actually gets us to look at that evidence through 5 different lenses, which is why the 5-case model is named accordingly. So what it says is that as we go through, what we want to do is we want to look at the strategic lens to talk about whether that went backwards rather than forward, to go through the first bit to say, well, actually, is it applicable for our organization? Is it right for us? Does it fit with the other projects and programs? And does it sit with where the strategy is going in the organization? We look through an economic lens and say, is this the best value solution to solve the problem that's been identified for us? We look at it through a commercial lens and say, does this look attractive to the marketplace? If we're going to need some inputs, and we need to kind of procure either some services or some widgets, is there a supply chain out there who will work with us? Is it good business for them to work with our organisation in order to be able to deliver the outputs of the projects. And interestingly, that commercial case can also look internally to some internal providers from other departments across the organisation. So it kind of doubles up as an internal and an external viewpoint. Now, the fourth one, the financial case, you can actually kind of say, well, why is that different to the economic case? This fourth case is actually about whether it's affordable or not. So again, when I go shopping and I'm with my husband, I'll say, oh, look, this is John, this is an absolute bargain. It's 50% off. It makes perfect sense to buy it now while we're getting such a bargain. Great value for money. And his general comment is, well, it's not value for money if you can't afford it. Yes, so the economic case says, actually, does this make sense? Does it make good economic sense to invest in this particular solution? But affordability says, well, actually, can we afford it now? It may be a great idea, and it may, kind of give us a great return on investment, but if we can't afford the money, then we can't invest. And then the final case, which is actually, is it achievable? Can we do this in our organisation? And the important thing about these 5 lenses is you absolutely need to look through all 5. And it's all 5 of these lenses that will allow you to create a solution that actually addresses and sits in balance with all of these 5. Hopefully, yes. And it is recognized that sometimes actually we cannot come with a business case that actually answers all of these 5 questions, which is exactly the point we're trying to get to, that says we can't find an appropriate solution, and the organization will need to decide to say, well, actually, do we want to do something that doesn't answer all of these questions? What is the associated risk to that? And actually, should we then make a decision not to sign off the business case and actually look at kind of some to kind of leave it for a while, or kind of look at addressing some other problems in the organization because they actually kind of tick all of those 5 boxes. Now, the important thing is to say is kind of what we don't do is spend months and months and months kind of working out all of this information. Some of you might already be I have to get my words right. Some of you might already know the kind of business cases aren't just produced in one dollop. We go through a number of iterations. So we start off with a kind of very high level view as to whether it's a good idea. We go into more kind of detailed planning to get a bit more level of information. And then we spend a lot more time getting kind of the final business case ready when we know that actually we've passed all of those criteria as we go through. And the Better Business Case, the 5 case model, does exactly the same thing. So what we would do is we would initially produce a strategic outline case. So this is a very kind of high level view of what we think we're going to be delivering. And even at this high level view, we do have all 5 lenses that we look at. We then go and spend quite a bit more time looking at the business case in more detail. If the strategic outline case has been signed off, we say, right, then we're going to spend some more time to really kind of bottom out the detail. And again, we would go through all of those 5 cases again. When that's formally signed off, we would then spend the final piece of work kind of sorting out the final kind of procurement areas, make sure all of those 5 cases in line, and produce the full business case. Now, again, in the tailoring guidelines, sometimes we might go straight to full business case if it's a small piece of work. Sometimes we might go strategic to full, and then other times we go through the full shebang of strategic outline and full business cases. So, the framework actually provides this kind of detailed process, again, which can be tailored to suit our organization. But it's the first time I've seen anything kind of that lays that out and provides all of the kind of the tools and help in order for both the project manager and the sponsor to develop their business case, but also makes it very clear from a PMO perspective what other support we can put in place in order to help the project sponsors and the project managers do their work. So that's my second observation around business cases. The third one is about focusing on all of the what, but not necessarily the why. Now, we often talk about, the sponsor is the person who kind of has to justify the business case and goes forward to ask for the money or request the money from an investment committee or the budget holders or whatever. But again, one of the things that we often find in organisations is that sometimes, and I did some work recently where one of the directors, kind of quite openly said, well, I find if I just shout loud enough, long enough, somebody will sign off the funds. And one of the important things that as an organisation we should do, and again, from a public sector, absolutely essential that we challenge how the public purse is spent. But in a private organisation, we should be asking the right questions to say, well, actually, should we do this change at all? And if we are going to do this change, does it fit in with the other things that we're doing? And how do we make sure that what we're looking for and what we're looking to do actually aligns with our strategy? So there are a number of things and a number of the steps that are involved in looking at the strategic case. And this is really the one where we looking to kind of align it to vision and mission, all of the policies and initiatives. So some of the work that has to be collected in that body of evidence includes an organisational overview. And again, we're not just interested in where the organisation is now, but if the organisation is growing or it's merging or diverging or going through a reorganisation, we need to understand why that's going to require a change to what and how we do things in the organisation. Secondly, we should be cognizant of what's happening in our industries in terms of some of the kind of the wider things that are happening. So what are the local kind of business strategies? What's happening from programs and operational plans? Where is the, kind of what are each of the departments looking to do over the next 3 to 5 years? And how does that contribute to strategy? What are the problems and challenges that we're actually having at the moment? Now, again, some of these problems and opportunities are not just driven internal to the organisation. You might well have heard of PESTEL, which is the environment within which our organisation works. So that's political, economic, sociological, technical, legal and environmental. So we've all seen new legislation come over the last kind of few years, which has kind of driven and been the driver for some of the projects. Again, some of the kind of the legal changes might provide great opportunities for our organisations. Some of the environmental factors that are starting to take place might drive how we need to do things differently in our organisation. We also through the pandemic, kind of some of the sociological changes that I think are still having an impact and are still kind of changing in our working life. Again, how that might impact how and what we do in our organisation. And rather than just kind of focus on some kind of detailed benefits, start thinking about why are we making the investment. So at a high level, again, so we're not talking about kind of specific detail. We'll talk about the kind of the 3 key objectives that often sit behind projects. Are they for economic reasons? Are they for efficiency reasons? Or are they for effectiveness reasons? And on the course, we go through into detail about kind of these 3 key drivers and how we can set some smart spending objectives that kind of drive then the benefits that we're going to identify for this particular project. And I think the other thing that, again, is not always done in projects is actually recognizing that different stakeholders might have very different perspectives on what they're hoping to get from the project. And so it's important right at this kind of early stage, we recognize that the benefits, and they may even be kind of conflicting, looking at kind of where the different stakeholder groups, the different use cases might be looking to either support or not support what the project is looking to deliver. And again, as I said, the important thing is that we recognise that we should be doing an objective analysis and searching for evidence that supports and actually challenges what is being proposed. So this strategic case, I think, has much more prominence in the 5 case model than often when we kind of see a business case. There tends to be kind of a half a page or a page that just does a kind of a brief summary of the kind of the current status. The framework takes us through a lot more detail to challenge whether we're actually kind of needing to spend money and time in the first place. So that's I really like the strategic case, and as I said, the thought process, and often the thought process is in there in the sponsor's mind, but this makes it kind of clear and open to other people who are going to be involved in either delivering the project or approving the business case. So the fourth observation that I've made around business cases is this one I mentioned, is where we typically only have a single option. So even within the business case, we see 3 options. I would argue that we have a do nothing option. And to be fair, you know, we always advocate doing that, kind of what are the implications of doing nothing? But most organisations, when they see this, is, well, actually, we wouldn't be doing a business case if we thought do nothing was a realistic option. But we do need to understand kind of what might go wrong, what are the risks to the organisation, what are the costs associated with actually doing nothing. But very often we don't necessarily see that as a feasible option. It's more a case of a warning to say we absolutely have to do something. So that do nothing option often is kind of previously been our only kind of view of the strategic case why we need to do something. The third option, I'll come back to the middle. The third option is this is our opportunity to put in to the business case anything and everything we might possibly do to make the situation better or to kind of improve the current situation. And typically, when we put that together, we almost kind of know that it's going to be turned down because it's too expensive, too long, too risky. But the idea is if we put all of the elements in there, people can see all of the things we might possibly want to do. Yes. And so they can see some of the things that we've actually kind of turned down. And then what we end up with is really the only feasible option that people want to talk about, which is the kind of middle of option. So we've said this is really what we think we can get signed off. And often again, some of those conversations are had in terms of, well, how much money do you think we can get signed off before we even start kind of talking about the solution and looking at some of those envelopes, rather than saying, actually, let's look at the solution and lots of options. And so a great thing within and it's built into the steps and the process, is something that's called the options framework. And in the options framework, what it does is we start off with 12 realistic options. Now, I can hear you say, 12, Aileen, we're lucky to get the 3 sometimes. We might even kind of get to 4, but 12 seems absolute madness. And again, what the framework has is it has a way of looking at some of the problems and the solution that says, actually, we can look at 5 different dimensions, not the 5 case model, 5 different dimensions in terms of what's going to be delivered, how's it going to be delivered, who's going to deliver it, when's it going to be delivered, and what the funding might be for that in order to get to 12 realistic options. And that's the plan. And that's where we start off. Now, what we don't do is spend a huge amount of time taking those 12 options through a full investment appraisal, an economic appraisal to see which one is most useful. We do an initial analysis against, well, what are we trying to achieve, as we've talked about already in terms of those spending objectives. We look at what are the critical success factors. So, those critical success factors are things that if the project doesn't deliver, there's no point in doing the project at all. So we'll assess them against those critical success factors, and we will engage with stakeholders to do a SWOT analysis of those 12 options. And often, we kind of get to the point where we have those 12. And interestingly, yes, What we've got now is might be some of the things we've kind of previously disregarded. We've gone through a more formal process and we've understood why certain options have been disregarded, why certain choices are perhaps not the most optimum for the organization. But we do it in a much more structured and objective way, but also ensuring that we've got the right stakeholders involved and they've all been given the opportunity to present their perspective. Now, when we've got those 12 options and we do that assessment, what we end up is with a shortlist. And this is where we've got, again, 3 realistic options. So we do have the kind of the do nothing option, but we've got 3 realistic options. And essentially, any one of those 3 options typically will achieve the spending objectives, hit all of the critical success factors, and in terms of have the right combination of analysis from SWOT. And what we do with those 3 in the shortlist, we take them through the economic appraisal. So this is what we do, and again, what people probably recognize most common as part of the business case is take them through that kind of cost benefit analysis to see if it makes financial sense and identify which one of those 3 options are it makes the most economic sense for our organization. Now, the important part for that is that it's not just a case of the options, it also includes risk. So we need to kind of make sure we understand what the implications are and what the additional cost is for risk. And from that analysis, we then get to what we are called the preferred option. So this is essentially the recommended option that says we've done all of the analysis. Now, in a public sector, we use the concept of the highest net present value. So again, we'll talk through what that means, but we also explore some of the other ways that we might do that analysis to pick the best solution for our organization. So we'll look at rate of return. We'll also look at multi-criteria analysis to kind of see what's best. But from a public sector perspective, it is the highest net present value that's been risk adjusted. So understanding that framework to me helps us, again, from a PMO, do that challenge to make sure that we've addressed everything. And it provides a much more objective preferred option, perhaps, than where we typically get, where we don't take them through that detailed process. So my final observation around business cases is that people believe that capital is the biggest constraint. And again, we find it, as I say, we get to the end of the year where we've still got capital left, because typically what is often the biggest constraint is the people and the resources to deliver those projects, and we've worked recently on producing the House PMO's worked recently on producing kind of resource management, and we're certainly looking at putting a course together based on that. But actually what this time it's not the strategic case that helps us to answer this question about whether it's achievable, but actually the management case. So as we go through the strategic outline case, the outline business case, and the full business case, it allows us to look in a little bit more depth in terms of, well, actually, who's going to be delivering this project? What methodology, what process are we going to use to do that? Yes, and as you see, it kind of builds up in a little bit more detail. So by the time we've got the full business case, we should have confidence that we can actually kind of deliver the business case that's been signed off, which includes the resources who are going to be assigned to that project. And again, as we said, having all of the 5 cases aligned, which includes the management case, ensures that we can actually get on and deliver the project. So again, the management case is not necessarily something new, because it's often known as the PID, or the content of it is often known as the PID or the project management plan. But actually kind of embedding that into the business case says, actually, we can confirm that not only is it right for the organization, not only does it make economic sense, we've got a supply chain lined up and we can afford it, we can actually kind of demonstrate how that project is going to be delivered. And we're confident if we sign the business case off, we can actually kind of achieve what's expected in the business case. So I think that kind of management case is a great discipline to go through, rather than signing the business case because it makes economic sense, but then scratching around because we can't find the people to deliver that. So that's that starts to give you an insight into some of the content of the 5 case model. So again, addressing some real concerns that have been covered by research from government, from industry, and also my own kind of concerns when I've been supporting organisations trying to get better business cases for a better delivery of their strategy. So the best practice guideline has been developed, and APMG have underpinned that best practice with certification. Like a lot of their certification, there is both the foundation and the practitioner level. So Paymore Learning is now an accredited training provider, and we provide both the foundation and the practitioner courses. Oh, that keeps going backwards. So in terms of what's covered at a foundation level, what we're looking at the foundation level is to ensure that people have a clear understanding of the structure and key terminology of the 5 case model. And essentially what we do at the foundation level, which is a 2-day course, we go through the 10 steps, pulling out some of the kind of the key practices, some of the key tools and techniques that are used in order to build that business case. When we go to the practitioner course, which is a 3-day course, which is the opposite way, because typically the foundation is 3 and the practitioners 2. For better business cases, it's the other way. It's the practitioner course, that's 3 days. We drop down to the next level of detail. So what we do is, instead of just looking at the 10 steps, we actually go into more detail at the 35 actions. And again, spend some time thinking about how can we use this in our organization. Because we're in a little bit more detail, we can have that challenge about what's kind of more appropriate, how it can be tailored to suit the private sector and perhaps some of the smaller business cases or the smaller projects that we're hoping to justify, but maintaining the integrity of that 5 case model. So unsurprisingly, there is an exam associated with each of those courses. So the foundation course is just a 40-minute exam with 50 questions within that. So they're multiple choice questions, typically 1 from 4. You get to pick the right answer, and they're looking at a 50% pass mark. So you need to get 25 marks from those 50 questions in order to pass. And it is a closed book exam, so the expectation is you'll have picked up enough knowledge over the 2 days to be able to answer those questions. There's no prerequisites, so you don't need to have done anything else in order to get your Better Business Cases Foundation badge. If you go on to do the practitioner, then like a lot of the practitioner exams, it's quite a bit more in depth. So we're here, what we're looking at is applying the framework to a specific scenario that's provided for the exam. And there are 4 questions, essentially 4 sections, each of them within 20 questions within that. And therefore there's a total of 80 marks, and we again a 50% pass mark. So you'll need 40 marks out of those 80 to pass. Now, and because it's more in depth, the exam is a 2.5-hour long exam. The difference being, again, with the Better Business Cases practitioner, it's an open book exam. Now, interestingly, as we say to people when they do the practitioner courses, you're not going to be able to get a question where you're necessarily going to be able to go to the book and find the answer. What you will do is go to the book and find the technique you need to use in order to provide the answer. Because it's a practitioner, it's about how you actually kind of apply that to the scenario given. So that's the content in the exam, and here are the dates that we're running the courses. So we're running our first foundation course in a couple of weeks' time, the 22nd to the 23rd of September. And we're just about to put another one scheduled to be in the diary for the 2nd and 3rd of March next year. Now, we were going to run a practitioner in a couple of weeks' time. We made a decision that actually we're going to do a couple of foundation courses before we run our first practitioner course, which is now on the 4th to the 6th of March 2026. You'll see that go on our website in the next couple of days. So if you're interested, do get in touch. And because it's a pilot course, we will be providing a discount for those of people who wish to attend. Now, if you don't want to, if you want some of our other courses, Jen's just told me their dates are already on the website, which is great, so you can kind of go and find them. On our website, you'll also find details of all of our other courses. And if you don't want to wait all the way till the kind of March for the practitioner, in fact, all of our courses can be available to be delivered in-house. And I have to say, I find, the Better Business Cases course is one of those courses where it makes great sense to deliver it in-house. And I've done quite a bit of work, even over the last few months, delivering this in-house, because actually you can get a range of people, from the PMO to the project managers, the program managers, people in the investment committee, senior managers who are sponsors. You can have them all in a room and you can go through the best practice. You can have conversations about why it might be a challenge in your particular organization, and perhaps some of the things that you might want to address and how it needs to be tailored. So do get in touch if you're interested in running that in-house. As ever, we are available to support further embedding. So again, we don't come and do it for you. We don't have contractors who come out and do that, but we do provide ongoing support to help your organization embed a solution within your organization. Or if you want one-to-one coaching, either as a project manager or a sponsor, or who we usually do with people in the PMO, we do one-to-one coaching as well. So I hope you've found that useful, give you some kind of insight into the framework, the kinds of things that it addresses, a bit around the certification and what's available for you. So any final questions or contributions from our audience today? Anything immediately come up? That's okay. That's
Hi,
fine.
Eileen. Sorry, it's Garrett. Yeah, sorry, reacting very slowly there. I know a lot of people might think this is just for public sector, but I found it really useful myself. I've used it in private sector, an international company. They don't know anything about the UK government. They don't know anything about government standards. But what we found useful was to look at what they were doing in their project business cases, and without knowing it, they were covering 3 of the 5 cases, talked about what the 5 cases offered, and they decided the next enhancement would be to introduce a 4th side. So they didn't want to go straight to 5 case, but just the art of the possible was useful for an international healthcare company that wouldn't know how to spell Welsh government. Yeah.
I'm curious as to which of the 3 cases that they were comfortable with and which was the 4th one they went to, Garrett.
I'm just trying to remember myself, but I think the one that wasn't relevant to them was the commercial case, because they were big enough to do most of their work in-house, or they wouldn't do it. Whereas commercial case is very useful, where you have a procurement step.
Yes. And interestingly, a lot of people don't necessarily separate the financial case and the economic case as to whether it's kind of economically feasible and actually whether we can afford it. And a couple of the exercises that we do on the course do look at and help us examine in our own organisation, how much time we spend on the relevant 5 cases, and start thinking about, again, as you've said, we don't necessarily advocate everybody taking all of the theory and applying everything, but it is useful to think about, when we understand the theory, what the benefits might be to our organization if we spent a little bit more time doing the strategic case, if we spent a little bit more time doing the management case. And again, because all of our organizations are unique, the benefits of kind of doing more in each of those 5 cases will differ. But again, that's where we do our roadmap and say, well, actually, how do we want to improve our business case processes within our organization?
Yes, and you can also cross-reference to management of portfolios, which you don't have to do. I mean, that they're totally independent. But in management of portfolios, we say because something has a valid business case, that's the ticket to entry. That doesn't mean you go ahead. It's necessary but not sufficient. And then there's an investment decision based on, well, what's the pot of money available? So you
Yes,
could have a great idea, and commercially it will wash its face, no doubt about it. But it just doesn't make the cut because you have a spending pot for the year, and there are other higher priorities. So
absolutely.
the better business case, it kind of helpfully almost separates that into two different cases. There's one, does it wash its face? Is it attractive for private sector in commercial terms, return on investment for public sector in terms of value for money achieving policy outcomes? And that's almost like separated from the question of how much money can we spend this year. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. So if if we haven't answered your questions and you don't necessarily want to shout out, that's fine. Do get in touch with us, and we're absolutely here to help. Happy to talk through, kind of your particular situation, and some of the things that you might find useful. Or if you want to kind of book and get on the course and you just want to talk somebody through that process, do get in touch. There's our telephone number. You can email us, and I think Jen's put that in chat, or you can do us directly from our website. So thank you very much for spending your lunchtime with us, and hopefully we'll see you on a course soon. Thank you very much for your time.